premised on the assumption that the cumulative revenue collections for the 12 months to December 2021 would total $390.8 billion. He also predicted a national budget balance of minus $30.8 billion, while the current account was expected to close the financial year at $73.8 billion. Now, to discuss more on the expectations of the review statement, we're joined in the studio by economic analyst Dr. Zacks Murerwa. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, to start off this conversation, can we just ascertain what the significance of this review is?
A very important occasion because it is the time where government announces and tells the nation the performance of the 2021 budget halfway through the year. We are already halfway through in terms of the fiscal year. And the budget obviously has to be reviewed in terms of performance, also where we are and where we are going. But also more importantly, it's a fiscal tool, which would then help to gauge, to have a barometer in terms of how the economy is performing in terms of growth, in terms of gross domestic product growth. Government predicted in terms of NDS1 a 7.4% growth of the economy, and we have had the Bretton Woods institutions actually also predicting that we are going to have a positive growth, although they predict only an average of 6.4%.
So where are we now in terms of...
So where we are now is too early to make an assessment. You can only predict the actual when you come close to the year. But indications on the ground is that this economy has been on a very positive trajectory in terms of growth. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, it's not easy to have a GDP growth rate of 3, 4, 5%. The actual average for sub-Saharan Africa at the moment is around 4, 5%, and we have quite a number of other economies that are still in the negative. So yes, we've done very well because government has actually made the interventions in terms of addressing the important economic fundamentals.
Now, looking at issues that are supposed to be addressed, the fundamentals, as you just mentioned, let's look at the COVID-19 pandemic, which ravaged our country, not only Zimbabwe, but then it is ravaging the world. This has had negative impacts on the economy. So what factors do you think should be addressed regarding the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, as you are aware, last year we had a negative growth rate because mainly of other factors, but also the pandemic did make a significant contribution to where we are. But government has made the necessary interventions. And we are aware and that the minister will, on Thursday, make an announcement in terms of the benefits, the cost to the fiscals of acquisition of vaccines and to what needs to be done to address what they now call the national herd immunity. So really, it has an impact. But look, in terms of what the trajectory is and what government is already put in place in terms of NDS1, the cognizance has already been taken in terms of the impact, which is very negative of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now, if you're tuned in, you're watching us live from our Facebook page, ZBC News Online. You can also engage with us on conversation on our Twitter page at ZBC News Online. Now, we've had some views and comments from our audiences on our various social media platforms, and we have at Mash Tafara here saying the Forex auction is not for the public. We're buying at $1 US at 14 RTGS. If it is not visible to the public, it is the same old story. What are we saying in terms of the auction rate?
Since its inception, I believe from a monetary point of view, the interventions that were made by RBZ and government in terms of the establishment of a now functional foreign exchange rate, initially the focus was on big business. Then, as you are aware, government then actually made a change so that we would have the small-scale operators, the small enterprises. But what the person is actually querying is, but we don't have access to it. All right. If I need Forex today, where do I go? I don't want in economic terms to talk about the parallel market because that's where they go. And they then obtain it at very high rates, which could be as high as 145 currently. That's not right, because at the end of the day, you still push. There's a push effect that we have in terms of your pricing, in terms of your availability, in terms of the cost of acquisition. What is probably needed in the short term, and probably before the end of the year, is for government to have a platform whereby ordinarily the ordinary person would be able to access, even through their banks, the predetermined foreign exchange rate, so that they're able to access foreign currency at a cheaper rate.
Now, you've mentioned how important it is for the general public to be able to access foreign currency at cheaper rates. Let's also look again at the issue of rates, which we're talking about, and which this person here raised. We have this auction rate, the former one, which we're supposed to be using, but it is surprising that sometimes you get into a formal shop, a well-known shop that you expect to be using a formal rate, but then it is the black market rate that is in place. Do we have mechanisms to deal with such?
Since the publication of SI 127 of 2021, it has sort of brought sanity. There was a lot of resistance from various quarters, business included. It was a way to try and force reputable or whatever, or small enterprises to have a pricing mechanisms and display publicly and openly the pricing structures that they have. But you know what it is like in any economy, you have people who outsmart the system. What we need to do is to have change a mindset amongst all the social partners, business, the public, government, labor, so that at the end of the day, we all do that which is right. We must not have actions that actually make the parallel market more functional. We must kill or disable the parallel market. So what do we do, the ordinary person? The ordinary person has to have access, should they need the foreign currency, to a formalized system. But however, I need to point out that foreign currency is in short supply. And whoever gets foreign currency, it must be used for productivity. Instead of, I know we have the consumption aspect, but that's why preference was initially given to industry, the manufacturing sector, mining sectors, and the various sectors in the economy.
Okay, now still on that issue, we also have at Muvirimi Emmanuel, who's gotten in touch with us via our Twitter page at ZBC News Online. At Muvirimi Emmanuel says, Zimbabwean salaries are in Zim dollar. All fuel stations sell petrol, diesel in foreign currency. The government sells fuel in US dollars. How does it work? If the Zim dollar is tradable, why not sell in local currency?
It's an issue where if the question you want to ask is that, is the Zim dollar tradable, or is it an acceptable mode of exchange, especially where one is importing? Obviously, when you're importing, you go to the foreign auction of market rate, you have your import. But the question has been, why are service stations not selling fuel in local currency? Because if we have persuaded all other players in the economy to have a dual currency system or a multi-currency system, why are we making an exception to service stations? Look, we have had the direct fuel importers who directly import the fuel using the US dollar component. We've had people who have been put on the national priority list by RBZ, and they make those imports. And they might not necessarily get the required foreign currency, even if they sell in local currency, and then they want to do a conversion for the next import. So really, I think that issue has to be looked at in phases. It's a very legitimate concern, but it has to be looked at in phases. We have not yet reached that level.
Now we move from our viewers and comments and back to some of the issues that we have here. Let's look at issues to do with stability. How can fiscal authorities consolidate that?
I'm personally very happy in terms of the fiscal interventions that we've had. And it has resulted in economic stability. These are some of the milestones that we ignore and sometimes that we don't realize. A drop in inflation from over 800% in June, July last year to where we are now, to less than 200%. It's quite a significant milestone in terms of what has happened. And we expected the minister on Thursday to actually consolidate that fundamental. It's critical because your inflation is going to determine your pricing factors. It's going to determine your salary and wage levels, which is a recurrent concern. And you have seen what has happened in the public service, in the civil service. If we achieve that stability in terms of the pricing factor, then it has got downstream effects that are very positive. Then also, in terms of the national priority areas that were set in NDS1, we have 14 national priority areas. Infrastructure, governance, and so on and so forth. But what has happened to date, if you look, for example, the mining sector, good growth, good interventions, and bringing the much desired foreign currency. If you look at what has happened in terms of infrastructure, electricity, rehabilitation, and all the other things, we are, and I would say the Second Republic is on the right track. But what is needed is for us to take the concerns that are coming, not only from citizens, not only from business and other players, but to take also into cognizance the concerns that are coming from the international community to get our economy right. As I have said initially, it's not easy to achieve a 6% growth rate. And we are happy we are along those lines.
Now, Doc, you mentioned the National Development Strategy 1, which succeeded the TSP, and the NDS 1 is running from 2021 to 2025. That's a 5-year period.
Yes.
We'd want to find out how the implementation is faring so far, and also looking back to the year 2018, where as a nation we set a vision for ourselves, attaining an upper middle income economy by 2030. Maybe also explain to us, because this has sort of become like a cliche, even in the media, what is an upper middle income economy?
All right. For people to understand, and I think at some stage government tried to, or has already done, translate the NDS1 into various languages so that people understand what we are going through. Basically, it's just a blueprint for a 5-year period, a result of the stabilization that took place under TSP. But basically, it operates within the confines and the national vision of 2030, achieving upper middle income. There are international, standards in terms of what constitutes an upper middle income. We look at what we termed gross national product per person, or a GNP per capita, and the norm is to reach probably an average of $12,000 as national income per person. Not only salaries and wages, but generally is national income. It's very much achievable. We are on the right track. But relating to the important question that you asked, how are we monitoring NDS1 in terms of the objectives? The role of the media becomes critical. People should just establish facts, and the ordinary person in the streets wants to see facts. The ordinary person in the streets want to see the benefits. There are certain things that they want to see. Rehabilitation of roads, hospitals, interventions in respect of isolation centers, COVID-19. You have got all these other programs that are taking place. So you say within the 14 national priority areas, we would want to see the minister on Thursday, probably highlighting to the nation the achievements made, particularly infrastructure development, because it is very key.
Talking about achievements, this is one thing that people have been talking about on social media. We look at the Minister of Finance and Economic Development telling us that we've had a surplus, and the ordinary person sometimes would want to fill it. What does it mean when we say we've had a surplus? I
don't want so much to think in terms of a surplus. What it tends to happen is to any government should zero on its national expenditure profile. And government, remember, 4 or 5 years ago, 3 years ago, we used to have recurrent expenditure constituting 92% of revenue collected. That's leaving no little, 8% only for other capital development projects or the like. We have now actually come down to just around 54%, which is a big achievement, all right? Now, when you talk in terms of a surplus, I think it might mislead people where they think there's extra money in the kitty.
Exactly.
No, it doesn't work like that. I think from an economic perspective is you have set a target. What has been your national expenditure to date? Have you been able to control and have the necessary fiscal discipline to act within the parameters that have been given to you individually at ministries. So what has happened over the last 6 months is there's been fiscal discipline, resulting in less money being spent. And obviously, we don't have a surplus as such. We still have a budget deficit. Remember, the minister had projected, yes, a 30 billion budget deficit. So that surplus is in terms of fiscal discipline.
If you're tuned in, your views and comments are valuable to us. Do tell us what you think. Do give us your expectations on our Facebook page at ZBC News Online. You can also engage with us on Twitter. We're at ZBC News Online. Now, going to our Facebook page, Doc, we have a person here saying, on car importing, they removed the ban and adjusted a bit. Can they please remove the ban and adjust a bit to at least 2005 cars up to date? Our neighbors are better than us, but are still importing such cars.
It is quite a legitimate concern, I would say. If you look at economies with a national or a nominal GDP equivalent to ourselves, you don't want your imports to be a liability financially to the nation. What I think probably government can do is to say, look, in terms of the domestic market, has it fully supported the production of vehicles domestically, so that those who had importing cars will now have an alternative market at reasonable prices to buy reasonable vehicles. And I think that's what is missing currently at the moment in terms of assisting or augmenting capacities of the local industry, the motor industry. On the other hand, if we have this appetite of importing, and I remember years ago, we were just importing and importing. We had that appetite. It has got an impact on your mindset where you end up thinking that an import is better than a local product. Now, when you look at motor vehicles, the result was, it was not the cost of just importing that vehicle. There were the maintenance costs, the liabilities, the health and safety concerns, and so many other issues. So I would say probably, yes, I think people need to lobby in terms of the reduction of 10 years. But I think it was a necessary intervention.
Okay. Yeah. He also says, subsidize on ZESA. ZESA has gone up and it is so unbearable to a common man.
The cost of electricity, let's just call it the cost of energy. I was just looking at best sub-Saharan practices, where in terms of the interventions that various governments are making, they're not going into natural sources of energy, your solar energy, your gas, your other sources. But in Zimbabwe, we've relied heavily on electricity, and electricity has been imported. The projects that are taking place under NDS1, in terms of augmenting our supplies, electricity supplies, and generate the required national demand on the national grid, would require that certain inputs come in, even if you establish small power stations or you establish government-to-government agreements in terms of building power stations and the like. So the cost of electricity, one has to actually index that cost. And that cost, the consumer obviously has to pay in terms of what is happening. If we subsidize, and there's a total subsidy, all right, the question is, the subsidy has to come from government coffers. And how do you then again augment government coffers to subsidize electricity? It still means at the end of the day, you still have to tax people highly. So it's a vicious circle. What is needed, I think, is first of all confidence. Let's have the supply to both industry and domestically. And once that supply is there, we control our inflation, we control the cost of electricity, then I think it becomes affordable.
Now, going back to our questions here, the Minister of Finance recently announced that civil servants had been awarded a 50% salary increment, and he said that this should not trigger any price increases in the economy. How can this be done? Is it even possible?
You can never fight what we term market forces, all right? Once you have increases in salaries, the assumption generally in the market is that people have got a higher purchasing power. Because you know that people have got a higher purchasing power, there is now demand for goods and services. There is an inbuilt mechanism whereby it's very difficult to control. Prices then tend to actually increase. It would be grossly unfair to the public service and civil servants to say, because you've had this 50% increase from July, it's likely to be inflationary. No, I don't think it should operate that way. All we are saying is people should live in standards that are no less than the poverty data line, the PDL, which currently at the moment is hovering around 42,000 for an average family of 5 or so, including even the bread basket, or you can use what we term the consumer price index. It comes to more or less the same figures. But what is needed is, and I still continue to repeat this, it's not about increasing salaries. It's about controlling the prices of goods and commodities so that they remain affordable. What will happen is we give everybody 50%, 100% today. The prices of goods and services will actually shoot up. So what you then need is to maintain stability. And this requires a lot of a dialogue and what I call a social contract between business, government, and labor, and ensure that basic commodities remain affordable. For example, your electricity that we've been talking about, your fuel, your school fees, and generally the bread basket remains affordable. Those are what we call the stabilization interventions. They then become necessary. If what you were able to purchase last month using 3,000 Zim dollars, and you are still able to purchase the same quantity of goods in 3 months, then you've got a stable economy. So what is now needed is stability of prices and goods and factor. Otherwise, we end up chasing amounts in terms of increase in salaries. You need to increase what we term the purchasing power.
The purchasing power.
Yes.
Now, having said that, from our conversation earlier on, when we made a follow-up on one of the comments from our Twitter platform, when this person was complaining on the price of electricity, and you said, you know what, if government is going to subsidize, it is still a burden on the taxpayer because tax will then increase. And then we have at John Ma 5957 here on Twitter saying, please tell him that this tax regime is just too much. My employee is Tanzwa. Just imagine paying more than 60,000 as tax to government. We want to hear progress on capital projects also.
Yes. The issue of the current tax regime and tax systems is an issue that I believe we need to really pursue the provisions of the tripartite negotiating forum, which is put in place modalities under which business, labor, and government can get together. But if you look at those concerns in terms of, on Thursday, for example, we expect the minister will widen the tax brackets. The impact of widening the tax bracket is that you increase your MTT, your minimum tax threshold. Currently, your minimum tax threshold is at 10,000. And if, for example, you increase it to 25,000, what effect will it have? Yes, you might increase the purchasing power of the worker because they've got better take home, all right? But at the same time, again, in terms of the revenue net, government also will lose. So it's a question of striking the balance between the two. We have had what we term a progressive taxing system, particularly on PAYE. At the lower echelons, you now have people paying less tax, all right? And then it actually goes up until you reach the highest income tax bracket. Best practices in Southern Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa, is to maintain that system. But you now need an inbuilt-in mechanism where regularly you now review your tax brackets. And this has happened over the last 3 or so years. We ended up with having 2 tax years in a year, January to June, and then you have July to August. This is likely to happen, and we wait for the minister to address that concern on Thursday. It takes, I have no doubt that tax exemptions and tax brackets will be widened.
Now, under NDS1, we have the Emergency Road Rehabilitation Program, where we've seen a lot of major roads being rehabilitated. We have one person here on Facebook saying local roads and suburbs need to be allocated money through local authorities, and local authorities need to monitor them.
What has happened under that emergency rehabilitation program is that it has been an intervention for government, realizing that to meet the infrastructure and utilities priority area within NDS1, government needs to make the interventions. It has done interventions in terms of establishing for local authorities that he has mentioned, the devolution process. And talk to any local authority in Zimbabwe now. They will tell you both rural and urban local authorities, they have received devolution funds. What is needed is transparency and good governance. I need to emphasize that. That people should see for themselves things happening. There's no point in terms of talking about devolution and devolution funds when people still drive through portals every day. People want to see results. So yes, that has happened. We are seeing huge infrastructural projects. As you are aware, the biggest one is the highway. Yes, highway. We are beginning to see that. But government cannot just do that alone. What is needed is to have local authorities, rural authorities, urban authorities do their own part. I believe to date they have not done well in that regard. I'm sorry to say that. Yeah.
Having said that, another issue that is really topical within our country right now is the issue of access to being able to acquire national identification cards and passports. This has been very difficult, and just yesterday on ZBC News we carried a story where there were very long queues where people need to come and book in advance just to get your right to an identification. Do you think that this is one issue that the minister will address, allocate more funds, or are there any funds there? Are they adequate? What's happening?
I wish that would be done, because the acquisition of those documents is a right. You have a right to have a birth certificate for your child. You have a right to have a national identity. You have a right to a passport. In some other countries, and years ago, even countries like Libya, the moment a child was born, the nurse actually came there to actually ensure that they issue those documents. For ourselves, we have developed over the years a culture of queues, a culture of not having the necessary infrastructure to support those things. It's one thing to talk about that, no, we are accessing these things when we still have got long queues. I believe you need to decentralize the process, improve service delivery, improve the culture of efficiency and operations, and give an opportunity where you say, those who are about to write exams, for example, and they don't have national identity cards, they are actually given a day or days under which that is going to happen. I don't think funding is really the major issue. It can be issues on like passports, but the person in the streets will say, I'm paying for that passport. Well, because I've paid for it. If it is an emergency passport and I need it in 3 days, I'm going to pay 200.
Recently there was a review in the price of
right,
passports.
so they were those reviews. So what we need is to embrace a culture of efficiency. You can have the money, but if you don't have the infrastructural efficiency and system synchronization, you end up with these long queues and frustrated people. We need to move away from that.
Now, Doc, as we conclude, most part of this conversation has just been me asking you questions and our audiences giving questions on what they expect the review to touch on. What do you expect the minister to touch on as we conclude?
I think it's now critical for the minister. Remember, this is a very important pronouncement. We are on a positive trajectory. I personally expect, and I know the reason why we are in this growth mode is because of the agricultural sector, the inputs and support that was given to the farmers, and the good rainy season that we had, hitting almost 2.7 million tons of maize when our consumption is about half of that. So what we expect is a rollout program by the minister, particularly in the next 2-3 months, in terms of providing inputs. We need food security, self-sufficiency. That's what Zimbabweans need to do. Zimbabweans ordinarily are hard workers. They need that support. I expect the minister to roll out that program. And then secondly, I expect the minister to tell the nation how he's going to stabilize further inflation. I would love a double-digit inflation. And the growth rate, yes, 6%, 7.4%. I believe it will be somewhere in between. It will still be very good for Zimbabwe. And next year, Treasury has already predicted 5.4% growth rate. Yes, 1% they actually said I know the minister will talk about COVID and vaccination. No, I think the fiscal policy would be far much above that. And importantly, I expect the minister for the support that is needed to industry, manufacturing, and the mining sector. Those sectors are doing very well. It's very unfortunate regarding the tourism sector, which in the past was contributing 6-7% to GDP because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That has not happened. So we expect the minister to actually tell the nation how they are going to tackle that. And lastly, from me, I think the issue of infrastructure, road rehabilitation, electricity, the generation projects that are actually taking place. I expect the minister to just announce and tell the nation where we are. Yes, we can talk about money. We are on target. We have surplus. But if we maintain the current momentum and where people see for themselves on the ground what is happening, we are in for success.
Thank you very much for having joined us. It's unfortunate we've run out of time. Our social media platforms are blazing. A lot of views and comments and a lot of expectations from people. And we hope that the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli Ncube, will take your views and comments into consideration as he reviews the performance of the 2021 national budget from the period January to July this year. From myself, Yvonne Mukondani, and the entire crew here at Pocket Hill Studios, pleasant viewing.
It's estimated that each passenger minute saved on the trip to Shanghai earns millions of dollars for China's economy.